American accent. The motivation makes a difference. I think I got this intelligible accent because I was always interested in this intelligibility. So I know the reason that I'm sharing this is motivation is a big deal in terms of this L2 speech. I think this is the number one factor. There are many, many features. I've done this analysis for years, and there are many other scholars doing this analysis. I mean, vowels and consonants and suprasegmentals, fluency and prosody. You know, it could take a lot of time. What is more interesting for me is, like I said, the threshold. At what point do we get to understand someone's speech better? And you don't find my speech difficult to understand. Although she may still have an accent. What is it? Threshold can be defined as a lowest requirement for an effectively conveying a message. What would be the threshold? So in this study, both studies are very similar. And I'm actually doing this study again for the British Council this year. So testing agencies seem to be interested in this idea. For ETS, for that motivation that I could like to include different varieties of accents in the listening comprehension test. Here I prepared 18 speakers, 3 American, 3 British, and then 6 World English speakers. Then we prepared the TOEFL listening passages. We invited potential TOEFL test takers from all different countries and let them take it. Here, 6 speakers, they are all inner circle speakers. So of course they can understand things pretty well. Within the other outer circle countries, these speakers are highly intelligible speakers of that country. They didn't have any listening comprehension test score differences. In other words, as long as the speakers were intelligible, test takers' test scores didn't differ. So this really confirmed the importance of intelligent speaker. Same idea for the Duolingo. The first and second, they didn't have any difference. Although, one thing I'd like to mention is these listeners were highly proficient listeners. But another study I got to do after this study, which was published in SSLA, was if listeners were highly proficient, they are not terribly sensitive to accented speech. But if listeners are around the intermediate level, then they are very sensitive. Even the slight accent seems to bother them. If they are beginners, doesn't matter either, because whether it's gonna be native speaker samples or non-native speaker samples, it's still hard. So what we found out is intermediate level learners are the problem if we decide to incorporate these accent varieties in the test, like high-stake test. So after these results, ETS said no, they are not going to include any varieties in their listening test, which I ended up agreeing because intermediate test takers were too sensitive to the degree of accent. This is a threshold intelligibility. I mean, I'm just trying to share that some of these features seem very important when we determine someone's intelligibility. So my point here is, instead of introducing this, or maybe it's at the end, when we decide whether someone has a good pronunciation or someone's speech is very intelligible or not, certain features seem to be more important than others. Not every speech features matter. As long as you pronounce certain features very well, people don't have an issue. That's what we found out. So, for example, lexical stress is extremely important. This is 1.6 out of 100. In other words, if you have 100 content words, you should not make a mistake more than one word of lexical stress. So this is an example. Let's look at an individual features just for an example. So I'm going to just share little by little. here, this is a script by a native professor reading this lecture file. Only a beginning part. This is oral English speaker, non-native speaker professor reading the same script. What we found out is, before I did this study, I said, oh, the pausing is important, and then how long you pause, how many you pause. I thought that's the important issue. After this study, what I found out is where you pause is more important than how many you pause. Even for this highly intelligible speaker, the professors especially, in the States there are many international professors, right? Sometimes students complain. I don't know whether you heard about the international teaching assistant issues in the States. Undergrad students complain all the time about these international teaching assistants teaching a class, but students don't understand their accent and they complain, all of that. But one thing is related to their pause. So the location of pause matters. So that's something I would like to say. I did mention lexical stress. Among many other features, let's just not even think about the red and green, those are comprehensibility and accentiveness. If you just look at the blue one, which is intelligibility, this is relatively linear. Lexical stress was the strongest one that gave us a very linear relationship. In other words, the more you're accurate, the higher intelligibility score you get. Some other features have a different pattern. So this is the important issue. And then what is more important for the lexical stress is, let's say, record versus record. It changes the meaning too, right? It's so directly related to the meaning itself. So lexical stress seems to be far more important than any other features. Functional load, some of you might have heard of these terms, means we try to rank segmental contrast according to their importance in English pronunciation. So in this case, basically what we are saying is not every segmental contrast is important. Some are more important than others. In other words, if you are teaching consonants and vowels, starting with a TH sound is not the best idea. But most pronunciation books tend to do that because Koreans, I would say, Korean doesn't have interdental TH sound, right? So based on the old 1970s contrastive analysis theory, we are supposed to spend a lot of time teaching TH sound because Koreans can't pronounce. I'm sure nowadays everyone can pronounce it because everyone seems to be pretty good at English. But when you're teaching your class, the TH sound here is very low in frequencies. It doesn't appear a lot in English. Also, if you mispronounce it, people still understand it. But if you mispronounce p, p, or b, it's a lot more important because it messes up the meaning. So we are saying we need to recategorize or revise the textbooks that we have in many of EFL, ESL countries, that we should reapproach the curriculum, that something should be taught earlier than others and should be spent more time on that instruction. The last one is intonation. I don't know, do we teach intonation here in the EFL countries? Do you think intonation is important or not? Or not important? Intonation is such a difficult feature. And many EFL students are known to have a problem with intonation. That said, there were some studies at Boston University that, we often say rising, falling, level tones, right? So we created these sound files and played those to many ESL students. Many students don't know how to distinguish from rising to falling or level. Level is the hardest one because a lot of languages are not based on intonation, and they don't explicitly teach this pattern. So nowadays what we say is intonation is directly related to pragmatics. Intonation determines someone's politeness. So this is an example. I worked with Naoko Taguchi, who is a pragmatic expert. We had the sound files, one in low in position, the other is high in position. Means low means very casual setting, high means like a very high stake. So a student and the professor. So student was asking professor whether they could extend the deadline for the final paper. So we asked them to make a request, and student was supposed to say, Professor, I was wondering whether you can extend the deadline for my final paper. You can say, I was wondering whether you can extend the deadline for the final paper. So you know I use the falling tone. But a lot of EFL students or international students tend to use the rising tone. Oh, Professor, well, I was wondering whether you can extend the deadline for the final paper. Because a lot of the students think that making a request means having a rising tone. So things are taught in a wrong way or inappropriate way. But that brings up a lot of issues in a real life context because students probably didn't mean it, but may appear very rude. Right? So intonation is another one. Overall, I summarized these patterns through some pronunciation analysis about 10 years ago. We received the sound files from the Cambridge ESOL, and 2 of my RAs spent entire year analyzing those files to death, like for every sound feature. Then we looked at the relationships. According to that analysis, stress and pitch, like lexical stress, prominence, they seem to be the most important one. Again, like 30% of the speaking proficiency scores were determined by those features. Fluency followed, segmental and tone choices. So again, my point here is when we teach, when we develop your curriculum, or when you do any kind of pronunciation instruction, think about what is important, what is less and more. More hierarchical approach is more important than just following the textbook. My last part is intelligibility instruction related. This is my former student's dissertation. So I mentioned these features, right? So what we did in this study, we try to develop the curriculum and try out how we can introduce these to our learners. So it was a 3-week lesson, only 6 lessons, but this is intelligibility-based curriculum. This is going to be traditional. We just use the textbook. Textbook started with consonant, vowels, and vowels. Given that 6 lessons, this one we start with consonants, stress, and prominence, etc. We wanted to start with the lexical stress, actually. We wanted to put the stress first, but then it was our students' request that they said pronunciation class must start with vowels and consonants. They didn't feel comfortable with the lexical stress, so we compromised. If we had a choice, I would have started with the lexical stress. But anyway, we tried out this idea, and then this is the result. It's like one simple evidence that intelligibility group, this is comparison group, both groups improved because we taught them very rigorously, but you can see the effect size is 2 times bigger within that lesson period. So this one shows the importance of intelligibility approach. In the field of second language speech, there are not many studies on this intelligibility-based instruction yet. So this is a future area that hopefully many people can consider doing. This one is data-driven learning, DDL approach. I've noticed some Korean researchers are doing this type of study. Maybe it's because many of you are interested in corpus linguistics. This is another interdisciplinary practice. The L2 speech speaker or researchers working with a corpus linguistics person. Basically, the DDL is try to find pattern finding using the existing data. A lot of the studies were done with vocab, grammar, those. But what we did is using pronunciation. This study came out just this year, 2024, TESOL Quarterly. In fact, there's a special issue on DDL in TESOL Quarterly. So our focus was on pronunciation. So what we did is we created a program like this, and learners can just click this. We didn't teach them what quantitative is, but when they click, they can hear quantitative instead of quantitative. And they can hear this word within this context or individually, all through that. Same thing for in order to. We know in is a very lax preposition. This one is not supposed to receive the prominence, right? So they can identify the patterns by listening to this again and again and again and again. As you can see, the results were pretty promising and very significant. The blue is the experimental group. Production, perception, they all improved. So this is just the one example that we could possibly do some practices like this, not only for adults, but maybe young kids. And I think I've noticed some of the Korean materials seem to utilize this idea. So this is just another example. My last part is the current AI-based research and technology-based research. I've been working with this team for the last 3 years or so. It's about the L2 intelligibility. My goal here is to develop an automatic software program that could detect your pronunciation features, then give you feedback, and then you take a look at it, and then you can improve. That was my original idea. It's not very successful, everyone, so you'll see why. First, we prepared a feedback like this, feedback form like this. I introduced the automatic intelligibility score, the Levenstein distance one earlier, right? So we used that. The intelligibility score came up pretty quickly. Although it's not like 100% accurate, like 76% is not bad, right? So we gave that. And then this individual specific feedback, we didn't have a program back then. So we hired expert raters. So my RA had to contact these raters. They had to do this feedback quickly. So all together, it took about 3 days to present to each learner. And we thought this is a pretty comprehensive, like your intelligibility score is this, your speech rate is 4.65 syllable, your rhythm is this, and then when it comes to your pause, remember we said location is more important than the number, so we identified the locations and all this. So we thought if learners could read this, they could appreciate it, and then they could improve. Maybe little improvement, but you could see the p-value. Nothing's significant. So they didn't improve much. So we knew something's wrong. Second, we thought maybe we didn't give them enough chance to practice. So we gave them an automatic speech analyzer. So this is an additional tool, like they could click, then they could immediately hear their sound, and then feedback together, they can just practice back and forth. Little better. You can see, at least it's moving up, all of that, but some features were significant, but some features were not. So still a mixed findings. Anyone knows why the problem happened like this? I didn't know until I was doing this research. Again, my idea was if I could have a free pronunciation tool that could tell me what problems I had, I could improve my pronunciation right away. The problem was our learners didn't know what intelligibility 97% meant. What we meant 4.65 syllable. So they had no idea how to interpret this feedback. And we gave this to teachers as well, and teachers didn't have an idea. So year 2.5, we prepared a manual, like a video manual, video clip, and we explained learners and teachers, and they had to watch that first. So 3.5 syllable per second meant, the professor, just like, me, I am currently, my speed is going to be around 3.6 syllable per second. Then we gave them an idea what it meant. And it was much, much better. This whole improvement was significant. And then this is what we presented at IIIL, and then it's coming out next year in TESOL Quarterly. This was much more promising because the improvement was significant. The experimental group, the red one, is moving up because you can see the interaction effect. So what we learned here was if you're going to use a technology-based feedback, the feedback must be usable, user-friendly. Your users must know how to use that technology feedback. Otherwise, doesn't matter how accurate that is or how good that is, it probably doesn't do a thing. So that's what we learned. This one is another new study. This is actually coming out in language learning. And this one, using the same idea, like how we present feedback. What would be an effective way of presenting feedback? Based on our technology, the one that we developed through NSF, this one can give a color feedback. Means like green means no mistake, yellow means 1 or 2 mistakes, red means more than 1 or 2 mistakes. And then using our current technology, we can give them a phonetic-based phonemic feedback. So the accuracy is pretty high, actually. So once we give that, but then after we trained ChatGPT to give a more comprehensive feedback. So we told the learners what this feedback means, then what they are supposed to do, just like teacher is doing. But ChatGPT was doing that on our behalf. So this was an additional step. Then individual, this is intelligibility score. This was actually significant. Although this looks pretty flat, but it's a significant. All these individual features improved. Another group in this experiment who only received the color feedback, like yellow, green, they didn't improve. Of course, the group who didn't receive anything didn't improve. Why? Because this is only 4-hour lesson. It's a very short lesson, but they improved this much. That's why I think this is pretty significant. But the group the people who improved was only the one receiving the pronunciation feedback guide along with the ChatGPT-based instruction. So that's another important part. That providing feedback is one thing, but utilizing it and making it user-friendly is another. Future direction, I mentioned this intelligibility study, and how and why is important for the measurement, so you could probably consider that. I hope, I've learned this through my 20 years of research. When you do your own study, it's so important to choose the right measurement. Yeah? When you have a construct, you must find the right measurement. And then the last slide is, I said briefly, doing research with the corpus linguistics people. I shared another study with pragmatics. The field is really valuing, I think, the interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary or whatever you want to call. That kind of approach seems very important. In fact, I am publishing one special issue for language learning next year, 2025, September, just on interdisciplinary research and L2 pronunciation. So there we have a paper from psycholinguistics, paper from pragmatics, paper from computational linguistics, all of that. Of course, technology is important. AI bias, I didn't get to share, but this is another study that actually Yuna has been doing with me. AI is not very reliable when it comes to accented speech. So that's something the field is really interested in, and that I'm doing one ground project on that. And mutual intelligibility and social. This one I briefly mentioned, triple AL, but this is a very big topic in North America, I'd like to say. So, I think this is it. Yeah. And this is my email. So some of you asked me whether you could email me. Yes, please use this email. Thank you, everyone. This is a long talk, so thank you for your patience and paying attention to all throughout.